Okay, so let's start. First thing you do is you pull in your microphone, which I've done here. To do that, in the scene, you'll add an audio input capture if you're going to take it directly, which I would recommend for your own microphone. Give it a name. I called that first one mic. This one is going to disappear. You'll choose it from the list. If there's a chance if you choose default, things are going to go weird. So ideally, you'd find your microphone, whichever one it is, and hopefully you recognize it. If not, go through, try them one by one, and then hit OK, and you'll get that microphone at the end. I do not want a second one. Okay, the very next thing you'll do is you'll turn on the monitor. And this is where you really need headphones. You need to be able to hear what's going on, because by default, you can't hear what's going on as it goes into OBS. This is very much targeting pro streaming setups, where you'll have other ways to hear the sound. You'll have other foldback in the room, and kind of just instantly playing everything back is going to cause feedback, and it's just a terrible idea. So by default, everything comes off. There's no foldback. There's no monitor on. So the way to get to that is you hit this little cog, and advanced audio properties. This gets, in my opinion, one of the worst designed dialogues in all of OBS. Mostly because this active sources only checkbox. What we have here is the list of all the audio devices. I'll come back and go through all the bits and pieces a little bit later on. But the main one that we want to do now is find our mic, which will be active because we've got it in the current scene. Active means it's in the current scene. And I'm going to change monitoring. It starts on monitor off. If I change it to monitor only, I can hear it, you can hear it, but the stream is not going to hear it. And if I change it to monitor and output, everyone can hear it. So that is really important to have set up coming back through headphones, and ideally closed headphones, closed backed. So these are my old headphones, which are closed backed. These don't let anywhere near as much sound out. I was practicing this with my open back headphones. It's just echo, 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 echo the whole way through, because every bit of sound that I hear escapes out and goes back into the microphone. So important to have closed headphones or earbuds, anything that's not letting a lot of sound out. Okay, very next thing we're going to do is jump into filters. I should also point out this vertical layout. OBS by default comes with the horizontal layout, which is fine. I like the vertical layout. It's a bit more like a traditional mixer. And so we'll open up the cog again and we'll go to filters. Now, filters are where you do most of the audio processing. And you generally get a few good choices. There's quite a few built-in ones. A lot to mess about with. Very intimidating. So there's a fairly kind of straightforward way of doing this that is going to give you the best results most times. But it's not fixed. It's not fixed. Occasionally you'll do things different. But if you're not sure, and if you're using things for the purpose they're being used, as I discuss them now, then you'll want to take this approach. So the first one is the Rematrix. This was a plugin that I went and grabbed off the OBS forums. The main thing this does is lets you reroute stuff. Hey Spouse, welcome. This is OBS tutorial. So the good thing that this will let you do is let me fix that panning. So my left ear is getting very tired. So I'm going to adjust it and put my voice back in the center. So essentially the channel 1 and 2 are the sources. The route is the target, so where it's going to. So in this case, I want channel 1 to go to channel 1 and also to channel 2. Let me just turn myself down a little bit to clean up that echo. Oh, did that turn it down for everything? Surely that didn't turn it down for everything. No, okay, good. You'll notice that I have some meters going on at the side here. A lot of cheating has gone into this. This is running through into, it is actually running through into Mixverse and through a whole lot of different programs to come back out so you can see the frequency spectrum, or more importantly, so I can see it, because you can see it at the bottom of the screen there. But so I can see what frequencies are going on, and also the loudness meter. Now this Julian Loudness Meter is really, really handy app. It gives I've used it before for mastering stuff. It gives kind of the real volume measurement of the whole thing. So you can see that this meter here, which I'll talk about in a sec, but this is going to give you kind of the full output, or at least the full output of the monitor, because that's what it's connected to. So I have set up that Rematrix, gotten my left channel and 0 on the right channel back into the center. So we've got that centered. You always want to do that first. If you need that, do it first. If you don't need to do it, don't worry about it. If you've already got a mono signal, it's fine. And if for some reason you want a stereo signal, then you can do panning with this as well. You can turn down one of them and pan yourself over to the other side. And if you want to dance from side to side as you're talking, then I guess you can sit here and do that, but it's kind of silly. Okay, next thing we'll look at is noise gate and expansion. These are basically interchangeable at this stage. For some reason you may choose one and not the other, but right now we're going to use them interchangeably. So the noise gate. What the noise gate does is if my volume drops below a certain level, it's going to cut out the signal completely. So you can probably hear, but you can more interestingly see over on this spectrum. If I'm quiet, there's still a lot of signal. And as soon as I turn the noise gate on, that goes away completely, which means if I'm not speaking, it's going to be silent. You can also see it over here where it takes a few seconds for the graph to run down because it's a delayed measurement. But if I leave it, then it is going to drop completely to 0. Now, if I want it to drop off quicker, so, okay, the controls that we have here are closed threshold, open threshold, and 3 timings. As a general baseline rule, closed threshold and open threshold can be the same. And what you want them to be is you want, basically, better explain it before I do it. We're going to push the open threshold all the way up, and then I'm going to talk quietly and bring the open threshold down until it triggers. And that's going to give me around about the level where my quiet voice is triggering the signal. So I'll start by bringing the close all the way down. It's going to trigger reliably and not just one little bit at a time. So there we go. That's picking up enough of my quiet voice to open the gate. The closed threshold I can bring up to cut things out a little bit more eagerly when I drop below it. So basically, once I've hit the open threshold, I can bring this even further down. Once I know the level, I just don't want to be above that level. I can be below it. It'll make more room there. The closed threshold is going to give you more space on the way down. So you definitely want there to be no noise at all when this is brought up. If I bring this all the way down, eventually it is going to drop off anyway because my signal's that low. But this is, again, it's a mess around with it, but the gap here can basically be any size. The bigger it is, the less likely you are to cut out halfway through a sentence. And as you've noticed, every time I adjust it, it cuts out a little bit, so you've got to let it sit. Now, these times, the attack time is how quickly it's going to go from closed to open. So if I set the attack time really short, then as soon as I make any noise at all, it's going to be open. And that includes kind of any background noises at all. If I make this really long, then when I go from closed to open, it's going to fade me in over time. So if I do that, then you'll hear every time I start speaking, it fades in really slow. So if that's the effect that you want, which musically sometimes it is, for speaking probably not. For speaking, these settings are not, they're not a terrible starting point. So we'll leave it about there. Closed threshold and open threshold, you are going to have to modify. Now an alternative to the noise gate is an expander. And what the expander does is it has a similar kind of setup. We have one threshold, which is the level where the expander is going to stop working. Below that level, it's going to reduce the volume by the ratio. So if I push the ratio a long way up, then you'll see it does much the same thing as the gate. we get below a certain level, it's going to cut you off completely. And it's basically doing the same thing with a different measurement. Now, as I bring this down, it's going to be more gentle about how it does that. So you'll see when I go silent, then there'll still be some noise at the bottom of this spectrum. And as I bring the ratio up, that will drop off and eventually disappear. So you can leave a little bit there. You can often get a more natural sound, more natural kind of coming in and out. It's really going to depend on what kind of background noise you have. And if you've got so much background noise you can't do this, you've got to deal with the noise for real. There's not much you're going to be able to do with in here. Attack and release you'll see are shorter than for the gate. That's because it's a smoother motion, because it's fading and it's continually reevaluating whether to be open or closed as it does the fade in or out. That's going to affect that. Also, this detection, RMS versus peak, is going to make a fairly big difference, particularly for voice. It's a little bit hard to see, but the level that at the very top of the signal, so the absolute highest point across here, would be the peak. Whereas the level that you're seeing here is closer to the RMS. So RMS is more or less averaged over time. Another comparison is the top of this signal here. So the one that's that red bar is the peak. In fact, the very top of the line is the peak. This black line that's halfway up the middle of it is the RMS. So you'll see if my peak is above -40, it is all the time. It is all the time. As soon as I start talking, we're well above the threshold. So I could bring this right up before it starts doing any expansion. And you can hear that starts having an effect, making me quieter when I'm quiet. Yeah, I've noticed my camera is doing something weird. I can try replug it, but I think it's something in the USB, and I'm not actually going to be able to fix it right now. And the weird thing is I don't know how it can be something in the USB. We'll see if that's any better. If it's too terrible, just let me know and I'll turn the camera off. So that's the expander and threshold. If I set the detection to RMS, it's more like when the body of my voice is getting up above that level that it's going to open up or close down. So far we've cleaned up the 2 channels, background noise. Next most important thing is the compressor. Now there's a lot you can do. There's a lot you can do wrong, but actually there's not that much you can do wrong. If you're happy with how it sounds, it's not wrong. It's not wrong. But as for kind of deliberately doing, setting the values here, that's where this starts getting a little bit more challenging. So this one, I believe, operates on the peak. So we're looking at the signal level. Let me turn that off for a sec. We're looking at the signal level at the top, which I'm currently peaking up around 10, which is fine. And I'm going to want to keep it up about there because I want to be loud as I can without peaking. So the threshold then, assuming a ratio of 10:1, so we're going to divide everything above the threshold by 10. If I put that at 30, then that gives us space of 30, which means in theory, we should only get 3 dB above that. So let's try that and see the effect. Hey Enzo, I am walking through some audio setup in OBS. So let's turn that on. You'll see, okay, I'm definitely much quieter. Not getting anywhere near as far above 30 as I was before. What you'll notice though is my RMS is still coming up is pretty much to about the same level. The bulk of my volume is still getting up there. The overall level is not. You can see I'm quieter over here, but it's more stable. Now, why isn't it just completely cutting off? Let me bring the ratio down a bit. That'll give me a bit more room. So now I'm getting a bit louder again. The attack and the release is why it's not just a completely flat level. If I turn these all the way down, now it should be totally flat. Now, and if I push the ratio all the way up, it's actually going to start sounding bad. It's going to start sounding bad. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit so I can hear a bit, but you can hear the roboticness. That's actual distortion. And it's why it's important that we have some attack and some release going on here. Personally, I think the defaults are a little bit fast. So I like pushing it out to about 22, about 180. Yeah, very robotic. I would never have the ratio at 10 though. That feels really, really high. And so what you'll see now as I'm talking is my peak is still sitting around about 10. My RMS is actually getting higher up. And that's the real goal of this. It's to bring the peak and the RMS closer together by bringing the RMS further up. So if I turn this off, then I should be about the same level at my loudest. But overall, I'm going to be quieter. And that's what the compressor is set to do. It's also good for if I move the mic away, then you'll hear I get really quiet. And if I bring it up really close, then I'm going to get really loud. With the compressor on, that's not going to happen. I'm going to stay at about the same volume level, whether the mic is further away or closer to me. It's going to change the tone. It's going to add a lot more roominess. Push it further away, you can hear my room. You can hear what's going on in my room and kind of echoes and reflections and everything. Bring it up close, and you're going to hear a lot less of that. But because the compressor's on there, my volume is going to stay about the same. So these are incredibly useful, especially if you get shouty or anything like that while you're streaming. We'll come back to it again in a bit for its other really, really powerful use. The last one that I'm going to do here is something actually third party. So OBS does not have an EQ in it. EQ is largely optional. Depends how, just how good you want to make everything sound. And for the most part, sounding like a natural sounding voice, totally fine. For some things you want a bit more control, you want a bit more tidiness up. So I am going to pull up, where's my window gone? There it is. So I'm adding an EQ plugin. This is TDR Nova. This is the one that I would recommend. It's a free download. Go search for it. Tokyo Dawn Records, apparently. And it is, once it's installed, it will just show up as one of your plugins under the VST2. And if I open the plugin interface, then we get this view right in OBS, and I get a lot more control over it. So I can do things like add my high pass filter, which is always a good idea for a microphone. Not that much. But you can see a whole lot of boominess right down there. That's just noise. And pops and everything. More distance from the microphone or a pop filter can help with those. But if you don't have either of that, that filter is a really good way to do it. And then I can just drag these around and change how my voice sounds. If I want to sound more manly, then I can add that low boost. I can make myself sound bigger. Or if I'm feeling too grating, too nasal, I can find that section and go and we'll just pull that down. We'll reduce that a little bit and make it a little nicer. That around about 1K also helps with the room. So if I back off from the mic a bit, then without that, you can hear a lot of the room noise. With it, it reduces it significantly. So I can have the mic further away without it sounding weird. And probably the most valuable thing I can do with this is set up a de-esser. There is a preset that just does a de-esser, but what you'll see here is every time I make an S sound, there's a little mountain here. There's a little mountain just pops up around about this area. And so what I'm going to do with that is grab that little section, find it. If I turn the Q up, it'll make it a little narrower. And I'm looking for and that's really aggressive, so I'm not going to leave it there. But what you'll notice is it sounds like I have a bit of a lisp now. But without it, that lisp is actually just really bright and sharp and grating. And so I want to reduce that. Now, I'm not going to reduce it by that much. I'll turn up threshold and then dial this down. And I'll do my and see just how far it is. And so now this is having very little effect until I make an S sound. And then you'll see that it just pops down, controls it a little bit, and that can make a huge difference to the overall sound of your voice. Now, as I say, it's totally optional. Natural sound is not bad, but if you want that really professional sound, especially if you need to cut through a complicated set of audio, That's a really easy way to do that. So those are my filters for my microphone. Last thing I've got is just the volume control. So setting this, unfortunately, there's no real easy way to do this. Either rely on feedback from people in the stream or start recording, go back and check the video, see if it's at a comfortable level. In isolation, it's never going to be a good level. Or alternatively, it's always a good level because people can control you. I will say there's absolutely nothing wrong with your signal peaking in the red. Oh, there's one other thing that I missed. Right at the end, if you need more level, so there's nothing wrong with peaking in the red, and I'd say you should end up there. But if for some reason you're not, so let's say that, let's just pretend, for some reason I'm just not loud enough. To get that level back, it's two steps. First one is a limiter. And this limiter should be as low as it can be without affecting your overall level. So I can see this is below 25. So let's put it around about there. It's not affecting my level for normal talking. And now I'll add a gain. And I can gain up to, but no more than what the limiter is set to. So what the limiter is kind of the emergency stop. So any sound, any sudden shout is going to be caught by the limiter and not peak. So if I turn that off and do another random shout, then you can hear it clip. You can hear it kind of break through and start crackling a little bit. So the limiter is just that protection. It's just that final stage protection. And then you can gain up to a little bit less than what the limiter is set to. So this is going to make sure I don't go above minus 27. This will turn that minus 27 into, let's call it a minus 3, because that's the difference. So that makes sure I can be nice and loud, even if for whatever reason something else in my chain is really quiet. You can do the gain earlier, and I would almost say that, hey pro, welcome. I would almost say that if your signal is too low at the start, then it's worth doing the gain at the start to get up to that higher level. But